This is actually a non-technical talk, so hopefully it doesn't read as bullshit. I don't think it is bullshit. I'm going to talk about the journey that we went on, basically to put ourselves in a position to do our best work around data science and algorithms, how we were able to plug them into the core of the product and actually solve real problems, which was for us a very long and winding road. We've had a lot of people here today. Many of you may know Chris Wiggins, who's like the smarts behind this operation. So you hopefully you've had a chance to talk to him. But I'm going to talk about basically the work that I've put in over the last few years to put him in the best place possible to have an impact, which I think is pretty important. So I do like to ask a little bit. Everybody knows the Times, but I'd like to know. I'm always curious, like who reads the Times? Like who read something in the Times in the last week or so? And who subscribes? Yeah, because I have a theory that we underserve the technical community pretty substantially, that our coverage is a little thin perhaps and a little spotty and comes from a particular angle. So I'm always curious to know who's actually reading. And that's a problem I'm working on too, but hopefully more to come on that sometime soon. So like I said, I'm going to talk about our journey that we've gone on to basically put our machine learning and data science people, our resources, into the best position possible to have an impact on our business. And I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the Times. I think you all know the Times. Been around for a while, 150 years or so. Pretty big company now, mostly journalists. We've won a lot of Pulitzers. We produce a lot. And this is important. This actually goes to the heart of why this work has been important for us. 250, sometimes 300 stories a day. Now, people mostly interact with us on their phones, and they're going to see maybe 20 or 30 of those. If our most engaged readers are going to see that many in a day. So we're talking about our most engaged readers seeing perhaps 10% of our output, and our typical engaged readers seeing perhaps 1 or 2%. That's a core problem that we have. We report from all over the world, and we have a big audience at this point. 150 million people or so a month interact with us in some way. We're just shy of 5 million subscribers between print and digital, about 4/5 of those being digital. We should cross that threshold very soon. And we're expanding in other ways as well. So who listens to The Daily? Does anyone listen to The Daily? Okay, so we passed our billion downloads mark pretty recently. It's probably 1.1 or something by now. So we're reaching a lot of people through audio. We have a weekly television show called The Weekly now on Showtime and Hulu. So we're branching out, touching people in a lot of different ways. In fact, I was just speaking to someone who's going to be featured, whose company is going to be featured on The Weekly in a couple of weeks, I think. So that was a surprise, and that's cool. But we're fundamentally, it's important to keep in mind that we're a mission-driven organization. And this is our articulation of our mission. It's going to be relevant later, so I want to spend a moment to just take a look at it. What we're here to do is we seek the truth and help people understand the world. This mission is rooted in the belief that great journalism has the power to make each reader's life richer and more fulfilling, and all of society stronger and more just. So a lot of companies have mission statements. We actually take this seriously. We don't always use these exact words, but we do look at everything that we do through the lens of the mission. And are we making progress against that mission? Or are we making the world better in this way by doing X, Y, or Z? And that's going to be relevant to some of the obstacles that we faced in embracing algorithmic approaches to parts of our product development. We're a digital company now. It's 20 years into our, and really everyone's, digital revolution, which is a pretty weird thing to think about. We have multiple digital legacies now. We've been at this for such a long time. But for us, it's really working. We have really, I would say in the last 2.5 years, we've really turned the corner, and we really are a digital business now. So, like I said, 4 million digital subscribers, a lot of getting into new products, new forms of media. What I didn't put up on the screen here is we have actually an extended digital product line now. We have a cooking product, a crosswords product, a parenting product, a couple more to come that I'm actually working on, which hopefully we can announce pretty soon. But But we are, first and foremost now, a subscription-driven digital product company. Years ago, in a document called Our Path Forward, we set a goal of $800 million in digital revenue by 2020, and we're just about going to hit it this year. So a year early. We're actually exceeding our expectations on this journey to being a digital-first company. So 2011 is the year that we launched our paywall, and that was a very, very different world. If we go back to that time, the digital landscape was all about the open desktop-based internet. Digital subscription was maybe just starting, but still the predominant thinking was that people didn't want to pay for content, certainly not news. So that we viewed the launch of the paywall very much as an experiment. We really didn't know how that was going to go or what to expect. Consequently, our business model at the time was advertising-led. We saw print subscription being regionally limited and probably peaked and declining even at that time. We thought digital advertising was going to be our way forward, but we thought, let's try this paywall, let's see what happens. Today, everything has changed. Obviously, the world is mobile first. We live in a world where we occupy the niches that are kind of left by the platforms for us to play in. And we live in a world where there's a whole ecosystem of large digital subscription businesses. That's a proven model, and we're actually catching up to a whole cohort of companies that really paved that way for us, which is wonderful. I would say consumer sentiment has changed. There's clear evidence that people are willing to pay for content, and we're capitalizing on that. And as a consequence, we're clearly now a subscription-first business. We've made a conscious choice, also laid out in that public strategy document, Our Path Forward, that we're focusing on the subscription business. We still have a big ad business. We'll take what we can get, but this is what we care about. This is how we think about the product. So a couple of just consequences of that, which we'll get into a little more. How do we grow a subscription business, especially one in which the piece of real estate we have to deal with now is pretty much the mobile phone, and we're only able to surface the tip of the iceberg of the journalism that we produce on that phone at any given time. How do we build engagement in that environment is kind of the key problem that we're working on. So let's dig into that a little bit. This is a representation of our customer journey, the top part being how we thought about it until up about a year ago. Not a lot going on there. Basically, we had a paywall. In front of that paywall, we didn't really know anything about anybody. The paywall was pretty far back. When we launched it, I think it was at 50 articles a month, and we gradually brought it up until a year ago it was at about 10, I think. But still, there were the vast majority of our readers were on the other side of that paywall. We didn't know anything about them. They were in this very, very open-ended extended consideration period, and some of them, like Pete, were cheating, which is really disappointing to hear about. It's okay, I forgive you, Pete. By the way, talk to me if you want. I can hook you up with a free sub. It's cool. Today, we did a lot of work. We thought about this a lot, and we realized that if we're going to be able to build engagement, we need to actually engage and activate people, and we need to have a relationship with them. So we pushed up a registration wall, and now we have this interim period where we know people that, first of all, they know what site they're on. They know they've come to the New York Times. They've taken the effort to register. We're able to interact and communicate with them. And our job, our core product challenge now is to build engagement, to get them coming back, to get them using us on a regular basis, so eventually we can take them to the paywall and they're going to actually convert. That's how we think about our business. That's the simple problem that drives growth for us right now, except that it's not that simple. The Reggie Wall's had a huge impact. Our population of Reggie users, this is actually the monthly additions, not the cumulative, has popped very significantly since we moved the Reggie Wall. So we have this big pile of people that we can engage with and start to build engagement. And the question is how do we do that? What are the hooks for us that are going to bring people in, make them commit to us, make them download the app, make them engage with us on a regular basis, and ultimately become subscribers. So recommendation is the obvious answer. Recommendation historically was incredibly difficult for us. And I'm going to talk a bunch about what we did for many years. This is actually the homepage on the web from just 6 months ago, and it hasn't even changed that much, which is fine, and I'll talk about why. But this was essentially our recommendation strategy for 5, 6, 7 years from nothing. This is what we were doing. The only piece of this page that's personalized is that bar 1, that little strip on the top, and it was only personalized under certain circumstances, and it was also loaded with like marketing messages and other kinds of things. But that was the only place in the most important surface in our product where we did any personalization. There's a bunch of reasons why. First of all, there's a whole ideology in the news world about the hierarchy of information on a page like this. And the layout is incredibly complicated, and it's toiled over by editors and handcrafted according to decades long established news hierarchy rules about importance and where on a page a story should go and how big it should be and so on. Very, very difficult to customize and play with this layout at all. And that's a valuable feature of the product. It's not just a old news tradition. It's actually something that we think certainly our existing customers valued. Which a more general way to say that is that the curation of this page was a core value of the product and remains a core value of the product. So for a long time, trying to work with personalizing this surface, we kept hitting a dead end. We kept ending up in these tiny little boxes, and we kept finding either legitimate resistance to monkey with the layout of this page because it actually had curatorial value. That's something that our users actually valued. Further down the page, this is an example of the kinds of things we would be driven to is just, again, ordering a set of stories within a certain category in a certain bar on the page. This is further down the home page, a section called Smarter Living, which is advice and so on, and we did a project that some of our best data scientists were working on for quite a while to just order the stories within this bar. So this was actually the thing that pushed me personally over the edge. I couldn't handle it. We had our best data scientists working on a small piece of a surface, and they could do the most amazing job in the world. They could triple the effectiveness of this bar, and it would have a marginal effect at best on our overall engagement, 1.5%, something like that. So that is the problem that I and along with Chris and others, set out to solve. How can we find the right way when we know that recommendation is a core strategy to use and our core problem of driving engagement? How can we find a way to do that in the product that is not undermining other core values of the product, not running headfirst into the traditions and practices of the newsroom? Because we knew that recommendation was a key driver for the subscription giants. We'd studied them. This data is mostly pretty old, but it's pretty striking. And I think we know this, but it's interesting to see some of the numbers. And some of you are probably from some of these companies and you know more than I do. But Spotify obviously has driven subscription tremendously through personalized recommendation. This is, again, old data tells us that 30% of their plays are from recommendation. There, a year or so ago, were 40 million Discover Weekly users, which is probably a quarter of their subscribed user base or a bit more than that. And they spent $100 million, as we know publicly, on the Nast acquisition and have a large data science team. Clearly, they believe it's a critical driver to their growth. Netflix, too, 80% of their plays come from recommendation. At some point, this is also old data, probably a couple years ago, they publicly attributed $1 billion of their annual value to recommendation, and they have a giant team, spend a ton of money working on recommendation. So clearly, they viewed it as a critical growth driver for their business. Pinterest as well, critical driver of engagement for them, huge team, big investment. And yet here we were with a handful of people working on a tiny fragment of our product and not able to engage in that way. So why? Why is that? Why did we find ourselves in that position? Again, we've talked about the importance of hierarchy on the homepage, the judgment and curation being a core value of that product. But also, there was a lack of clarity around the strategic impact and fit of a recommendation strategy. And I think that focus on the homepage was reinforcing that lack of clarity. So basically, we're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole to a large degree. We also had legitimate concerns over creating a filter bubble. The filter bubble, if you're not familiar with the language, I'm sure you are, is the idea that you, in a news context, if you only see the things that you supposedly, quote unquote, want to see, your views are going to be reinforced. You're not going to be challenged to consider other viewpoints and so on, and it contributes to the polarization of the country. We cared a great deal about that, but we had not yet set ourselves to the task of solving that problem or thinking about how to mitigate it. The last factor I say would be a perfectionist ideal at the Times. I mean, the Times is rooted in a attitude to quality that is pretty uncompromising, and to get started at a hard problem like recommendation, we kept running into feelings of like, oh, these recommendations aren't good enough. Like this isn't Times quality. That story, why did I get that story? I don't understand. And a desire to then like stick our hands in and like tinker too much with the workings of the algorithm or the context. That usually took the form, as it did in this case of the Smarter Living module, of like limiting the universe of content very, very severely, so that we felt like we were in more control and could control the output more, but unfortunately undermining the effectiveness. But the other problem was just that we hadn't asked and answered the question of like, does this work actually support our mission? And if so, how? So if our mission is to help people understand the world, how is this actually helping us to do that? And we needed to engage with that. So how would recommendation, personalization help people understand the world, help them deliver the truth to them more, enrich their lives, and help make society stronger and more just? We needed to actually work our way through that question. So we did a bunch of research over a period of a year and a half to try to tease out how our readers felt about recommendation, what they thought its role in the product could be and should not be. And as typically happens when you do a lot of user research, we got very ambiguous answers. Starting with the idea that personalization solves for FOMO until it doesn't. On one end of the spectrum, there's so much here, I'm only seeing a little bit, like what am I missing? And the other end of the spectrum, I'm only seeing the things that I know I'm interested in, so what am I missing? Personalization only goes so far, we can only surface so much. How do we strike a balance between feeling like we're showing the thing, but we're also showing like the right angle of the thing, the right proportion of the thing that is meaningful to you? So we heard users say things like, I like that you, and this is a comment about NPR, that you don't know me too well, I don't feel too boxed in by your recommendations, but then, well, maybe slightly more tailored news stories would be helpful, and then, recognition from this user that, I contradicted myself. So very mixed signals. We also learned that personalization means many things to people. It can mean personal things, my history, things that I've read before, things that I've saved, things that are just mine. It can mean optimized to me in some explicit way, things that I've chosen, things that are specific to my location or like objective facts, or prediction based. It can be things that, based on what you know about me, you think I'll be interested in. And all of these things blur together in people's minds, and they're not necessarily like separating them out and slicing them apart. And then we definitely saw that people had mixed feelings about personalization in news. Many people felt that they didn't want personalization, even though they felt the need for relevance and more focus in the product. We heard people say things like, top stories should stay away from being too personalized. That's what I value about the MIDs, that it's not customized. They liked the curation of the homepage. I think they associated that with being unbiased. So we knew that there was something there that needed to be preserved. So what personalized experiences did we feel that readers wanted from the New York Times? Subscribers and non-subscribers want an idealized news home screen that focused on breaking news and summaries and like the news as it's objective, as it could be said to be objectively framed. But then they also wanted variety. They also wanted things that adapted to their interests, the time of day, the mood they were in, the location, and to their particular favorites. They wanted both of those things. And I think that was the central insight that we had, is that those are actually two different things. Don't try to mix them. So that pointed us in the direction of a recommendation product strategy. And we went from there. So starting from our goals, thinking hard about our goals, our core goal being to drive engagement for that cohort of activated users. Once they've signed up, they know who we are, we know who they are. We're trying to get them to come back every day. We focus on frequency as our core metric. The more often that people are coming to us was our key. We didn't care if they come for short sessions. In a mobile world, you have to be comfortable with people coming to read one article, maybe two articles at the most. But if we can get them to come back frequently, we're achieving our goal. Another way to say that is to encourage a habit, to have people opening us hopefully every day. And then we wanted to figure out how to determine whether, if each session felt relevant, if they found at least one thing that they found to be relevant, then that would be regarded as a success. The metric we honed in on was ultimately, one click, like a session with one interaction was success, a session with no interactions is failure. And that evolved into becoming kind of our North Star and our core reward function. And then discovery, which is a very complex and somewhat contradictory notion, we wanted to actually surprise and delight people. We wanted to drive people down into the report in different ways, potentially into things that they may not be interested in, but have a mechanism to find out. And we used a metaphor of the physical paper here, where you could take the physical paper, kind of walk in the door, throw it on the table, the sections spill out, there's a bunch of stories there that you're exposed to, and there's an element of serendipity to that. Or for people like me who read the paper backwards, there's like an element of serendipity of undermining the hierarchy and leading to unexpected results. That was missing in the digital product, and we wanted to recreate something of that. We thought about thinking in terms of recommendation products, so not just features, not just layering recommendation into an existing product, but actually how to craft a portion of the product as a full recommendation experience. Again, Spotify was a model for us. Discover Weekly is not just throwing stuff at people, it's within a particular context. Here's new music you may not have encountered before. Solving a particular problem, I'll turn to it when I'm ready to listen to new music, etc. Release Radar is a little more focused, a little more specific, etc. So a series of personalization products is what Spotify's created, and we thought that was very effective and wanted to find a way to express that in our world as well. Again, clear goals, understanding what we were trying to solve for, and then understanding strategically what role we were playing in the customer journey, where were the impact points, and how could we really shift people from one stage of the journey to another. So in the spring, we launched this product called For You. It's a second tab in the app. Who has seen this and interacted with it? Anybody? Not too many people, so we still have a lot of work to do, just hired a product marketing person. But we launched this product in the spring. It's a second tab, so totally distinct from the home page. And that's, again, that idea that there are two things people want. We ought not to mix them. We're going to treat them separately. The user need is discovery, relevance, a second reason to open the app. If in the morning I open the app to say, what's happening, what do I need to know? This is more like maybe in the afternoon, what else is going on? I've caught up on the news. Now I want to learn something about the world. Again, the metric is a session with or without engagement. We'll take one click, and that's fine. That's plenty. And then we also thought that this can be expressed through re-engagement mechanisms such as email, push notifications, in order to bring people back to the product. We have a follow mechanic that drives the start, the on-ramp for this product. Quite similar, the thinking is at least quite similar to the way that Netflix uses onboarding. We'll ask you a bunch of questions. It's half just to get you engaged in the product, half to get over the cold start problem and have an indication of what people's interests are. And then we layer in information about people's actual reading habits and what's successful in our discovery, explore, exploit. What we find that people actually like over time as we have that reading history. But we've defined these channels to get people started, to get people oriented a little bit. And that's been successful for us. That's the first time that we've had a substantial recommendation product within the main product. We know what it's for. We know how to talk to people about it. And we know that it has an impact. So we've seen the lift that it provides to people who are in that middle stage of the funnel in their customer journey. And we've seen it raise engagement, and it's working. So that led us to think, okay, we can solve a problem. We can have an impact on the business. How do we go from recommendation, from solving one problem, to thinking about an AML program that seeks the key problems across the business and organizes us to solve each of them? We worked a lot with a guy on this named Carlos Uribe, who some of you may know. He was one of the key people doing personalization at Netflix for 5 or 6 years, spent a little bit of time at Facebook. And Chris knew him and introduced him. We brought him in to work with us at the Times. And half of what he did was what consultants typically do, which is just tell us what we already thought we knew with a little more authority, and told our executives, people like my boss, Mark Thompson, the things that they needed to hear to believe what we were telling them, basically. But also we learned a lot from him. We learned a lot about Netflix's journey and how they had gone, and then a lot about how to actually structure a program and what was important. It was really helpful. So we tried to get him to come in and spend more time with us, but he told me, he was like, no, I'm going to take a break from working. I need to like relax and rest a little bit. And I said, oh, that's great, Carlos, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the beach or something? And he's like, no, I'm going to go back to Stanford and study particle physics. So I was like, okay, that's good, and you enjoy that. Let me know if you need any help. I'm happy to try. He's a great guy. So we thought about what an applied machine learning program would look at the times, and there were a couple of key things we were solving for. If the core goal was to identify the key problems in the business that are tractable to machine learning and organize our precious resources around them, then a structure like this with teams oriented around specific problems was what we landed on. We've talked about algorithmic recommendation as one problem. Another one that we've started on later now is what we're called algorithmic targeting, which is targeting offers and basically optimizing all of the key variables in the customer journey in real time. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But the most important thing here was to recognize that this works best when it's data science led. One of the problems that we'd had was well-meaning, very smart product managers running our personalization products, but not really understanding how machine learning works, how algorithms work, even how to frame the problems properly. So leaning in too much, saying like, I think it's geography, like let's make everything geographically targeted. And then we'd like spend 6 months running down a path to do that only to find out that it didn't have any impact. So we said at the beginning, like these teams are gonna be led by data scientists. They're gonna be data science and engineering and data analysis partnerships but they'll be data science led, and they're gonna work at kind of one remove from the product. So each of these teams is actually partnered with a product team, but the relationship is mediated through a clear problem framing. It's like the product manager's responsibility is to say, okay, this part of the product, I'm handing over to you, this surface, here's what we're optimizing for, now you can do whatever you want. And then it's the data science lead's job to say, okay, here's how we're gonna translate that into a machine learning problem and how we're gonna actually build an algorithm to optimize for it. That's proven to be really important and difficult to sustain. It's inherently kind of unstable. There's been a lot of push and pull from product people wanting more control, data science folks pushing back and saying, okay, you're dragging us into like a territory where we can't do our best work. So it's required a lot of oversight and care and feeding to keep this balance in proportion. But I honestly believe it's been one of the keys to us actually making progress on some of these problems. And again, like not degrading into kind of, hey, optimize these 20 stories, like the order of these 20 stories in this little box, which is one of the viruses that we had before. Teams oriented around specific problems, ultimately leveraging a shared platform, and then with some like executive level oversight to protect that balance is the structure that we've landed on. So we talked a lot about algorithmic recommendation. Algorithmic targeting probably has the potential to have a bigger impact on our business. We're just getting started on this. This is too much of an eye chart probably to read, but this is a representation of our customer journey, mapping out all the points where basically there's a variable that we can optimize the value of that will optimize conversion to the next stage. The first piece that we've worked on is at the very end of this process, when we've sold somebody a subscription to the core product, what do we offer them? We typically offer them our ancillary products, crosswords or cooking or parenting, or the all access bundle. So what can we offer them to maximize the lifetime value of that subscriber? And we saw over 100% boost on the LTV from optimizing that piece of the journey. So as we go up and we optimize the values of the registration wall, the meter count for the paywall, the price, the discount that we offer, the period that we offer for how we transition people from a discounted price to the full price, all of these variables, we think there's an enormous amount of potential to actually substantially move the needle on the business, and we're super excited about that. And then we're looking at our ancillary products and how to start layering in algorithmic optimization, particularly recommendation, into each of those. So with cooking, we actually had an intern project over the summer to create a recommendation band of recipes. Again, like this to me feels kind of like one of those tinkering around the edges things. But it's a fine way to get started. And immediately we saw it had a 33% lift in the effectiveness of research on that band and a over 10% lift on research on that whole page, which is pretty meaningful actually, and has helped us to drive engagement in that product. We'll be looking at our parenting product as well in the same way. Games is a little trickier to figure out how to apply, but we're going to take a look at that. Certainly we have the opportunity to optimize the paywalls and the customer journeys around each of these products as well. So we think there's a lot of value there too. So that's where we are. That's the program that we've shaped. That's kind of the journey and how we got there. I want to go back a little bit to talking about our mission and how we thought our way through how this work is valuable to our mission, how it actually moves forward, the most important work that we do at the New York Times. So as we thought of a recommendation, there were a lot of perils. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we found it so difficult to get going. There are so many ways for it to go wrong, and we were very, very sensitive to those. First of all, that comment that we heard from many users about this tension between recommendation and the feeling that something is unbiased was a way that we could fail. And creating a filter bubble would be a way that we could fail that we were very attuned to. There are other ways as well. The idea of the tyranny of preference. Do people just want the same thing over and over again? Do they just want similarity, or do they want discovery? Those are very different problems. How do you solve for them? How do you balance them? And then the idea of like relevant garbage, like things can seem to be relevant, but be superficial, be kind of junky. This is what we see all over the web, where, if relevance is measured as a click, you end up feeding clickbait and you end up with a bunch of junk that's like superficially engaging, but not sustainable or productive or valuable. So these are like a bunch of the things that we had concerns about. So we talked about our mission. Under the mission is the whole set of values that we also look at and use as guides, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One of them is curiosity, the idea that open-minded inquiry is at the heart of our mission, and all our work, we believe in asking questions, seeking out different perspectives, and searching for better ways of doing things. So thinking about this, we felt that discovery really was like the key to this, and the way that we could fit this work into our mission in a way that felt genuine and real. So again, like on a mobile screen where people are only going to see 20, 30 stories, like how could we use recommendation and that second screen, that second opportunity to open up people's aperture, to really put different kinds of stories in front of them, to engage their curiosity, to reward their curiosity so that every time they open the app, they saw something that fed their curiosity, that gave them like something to think about, something new to experience, that felt highly aligned and motivated us. And then the other one was respect. We haven't talked too much about this, but we've also been looking at a global audience and how do we become relevant around the world. And this is a core thought in our value of respect. How do we help a global audience understand a vast and diverse world? How do we do that fully and fairly? How do we treat our readers and our subjects with empathy and respect? And we felt that using recommendation to meet people a little bit halfway, to say, here's what you need to know, but here's a bunch of stuff you're interested in, was actually a way of showing empathy and respect for our readers, respect for their time, respect for their state of mind, respect for what they needed in that moment. And we found that to be also highly motivating and clarifying for us. So with those values in mind, the thing that got us over the hump was really the idea that we could use recommendation to reward curiosity, to show respect, and to use those two things to build trust with our readership and our extended readership and our new global readership as we acquire them. Can we meet each reader halfway in the world, in their journey, in whatever moment they're in? Can we use the machinery of engagement, not just to drive our business, but to build a virtuous habit of curiosity, a habit of discovery? Could that habit over time condition and generate trust? Could it expand what people think of us, what they think of our brand, therefore how they're able to perceive our mission and overcome some of the obstacles that we have with people seeing us in a certain light, as a news source of a certain kind? And could that curiosity and trust in turn, in a small way, help to engender a more compassionate and just world? So I like to think that's our real goal behind this program, and I like to think it's going pretty well, and we're just getting started, and I'm super excited for what happens next. Thank you.